Hey there. Tonight, we travel back in time to a place where the scent of iron lingered in the air, where chairs had straps instead of cushions, and where a trip to the barber could mean anything from a shave to minor surgery. This is not the quiet barbershop with a jazz playlist and scented oils. This is the world of the medieval barber-surgeon, a curious hybrid of stylist, dentist, and amateur blood technician. And tonight, you're stepping into his shoes. Just for a day. Or more likely, until you faint. Before we begin, if you find comfort here, please support the channel by liking, subscribing, and leaving a gentle comment about where you're watching from. It truly warms my heart to know you're enjoying this and that we're helping to make your nights more restful. And now, our story begins. You wake up before the sun. Your hands are already sticky. The scent of yesterday's work still clings to your apron. A blend of sweat, dried blood, and whatever passed for antiseptic in the year of our Lord, 1347. Maybe rosemary water. Maybe just hope. Your shop is barely a room. Wooden walls, one window, and a stool that wobbles like it's hiding a secret. There's no sign, just the red and white pole, a twisted ribbon of barber fame and faint dread. The red is for blood. The white is for the cloth that caught it. You don't explain this to your customers. They already know. You begin the day by boiling your instruments, not because you're obsessed with hygiene, but because rusted blades are harder to use. There's a metal basin, some razors, a jar of leeches, and your prized possession, a saw with teeth that don't ask questions. The fire under your cauldron crackles softly, and for a moment, it almost feels peaceful. The first customer is not here for a haircut. He's got a toothache. You nod solemnly. You have no formal training, no license, but you do have pliers, not the fancy kind, the blacksmith's kind. You offer him a piece of wood to bite. He refuses. So you offer your assistant's arm. That, too, is declined. Finally, he just grips the stool and hopes his ancestors are watching. You press the tooth with your thumb. He flinches. It's the right one. There's no countdown, no numbing, just pressure, and then a sound like a walnut cracking. Blood follows. It always does. He groans through clenched teeth. You smile gently and offer a cloth that used to be white. He presses it to his mouth. He thanks you. Somehow, you wipe your hands on your apron. One down. Later, a boy arrives with a cut. Deep. From a fall or a fight, he won't say. You clean it with vinegar. He screams. You blow on it, like that will help. Then you sew the skin with thick thread and a needle you used last week on a pig's leg. He survives. You tell him to rest. He doesn't. No one does. Rest is for nobles and corpses. You barely sit before the barber chair groans again. This one wants a shave. A normal request. Gentle, almost poetic. But his skin is rough, his beard thick, and your blade is dull from too many skulls. You sharpen it on the stone, dipping it in oil and testing it on your thumb. A bit too sharp. Perfect. You lather his face with something foamy. Soap, maybe, or goat fat. He closes his eyes, trusting you, which is always a mistake. The blade glides across his jaw, and you focus hard, not because you care about precision, but because too much blood will stain your sleeves. Again, a tiny nick. He doesn't notice. You dab it with linen. When he leaves, he pays with a coin and a nod. You place the coin in the box. The nod you keep for yourself. But the day isn't done. The priest comes next. Not for a haircut, for bloodletting. Yes, you still do that, because in this world, illness isn't caused by germs. It's bad blood, bad air, maybe bad thoughts, and your job is to fix it with a cut. You tie his arm with a strap. His veins are shy. You coax them with a tap. The blade slides in, slowly. You catch the blood in a bowl. You don't flinch. He watches it with mild interest, like it's wine being poured at dinner. After a pint, you stop. He looks paler. That means it's working. He blesses you. You nod. Again. Your hands are now red, dry, and beginning to crack from the vinegar and weather. You smear them with pig fat and wrap them in linen. Not because it's healing, because it hides the truth from the next customer. And still, they keep coming. It's mid-morning now. The sun has climbed just high enough to cast a faint warmth through your crooked window, illuminating dust motes that dance like tiny spirits. The air smells of iron and boiled cloth. You take a sip from the jug in the corner. Not wine, not water, something between the two. It's sour, but it keeps your hands from shaking. You barely have time to swallow before a knock at the door. It's not really a knock, more like a frantic thump, followed by a groan. You open it to find a man half dragging another. The one being dragged has blood on his tunic, and not the poetic kind. You recognize the signs. Maybe a blade, maybe a brawl, maybe just a really bad fall. Either way, he's not here for a trim. You motion for them to lay him on the table, the same one where you sometimes eat. His eyes are closed. His breathing is shallow. You don't ask what happened. You don't want to know. You just grab your tools, cloth, vinegar, your needle, and the saw. Always the saw, just in case. His arm is broken. That much is clear. But the gash on his thigh is worse. You press around the wound. It pulses. The cloth you press in comes out wet and red and hot. You begin stitching before the blood slows. Your assistant, barely more than a boy, holds the man down. The man moans but does not wake. You work fast, but not rushed. There's no room for mistakes, not because they're fatal, but because they're messy. When you're done, you rinse the wound with what little wine remains in your jug, not for sanitation, for the sting. If he twitches, he's alive. If he curses, even better. You bandage him tight and motion for the other man to take him away. He leaves a coin, copper. You set it in the corner with the others. They glint in the low light, like tiny medals you never earned. Now finally, there's a moment of silence. You sit. Your knees ache. Your back is stiff. Your fingers smell like vinegar and old blood. You'd rest if rest meant anything, but it doesn't. Not today. A woman walks in. She's young, not a patient, a question. She holds out a tooth. Not hers, someone else's. She found it, she says, outside the tavern. She asks if it's cursed. You shake your head, but gently. You tell her to throw it in the river. Teeth carry stories. Best to let them float away. She nods, thanks you, and leaves behind a small piece of bread. Stale, but food. You wrap it in cloth and set it on the shelf. It will be your supper. Maybe. The next customer is old, really old. He walks like the floor is fighting him. He's missing most of his teeth, and the ones that remain look like old fence posts. He wants a haircut. You oblige. You tilt his head, slowly, carefully, like it might break. His hair is wispy and smells faintly of onion. You comb it gently, using a bone-handled tool. You carved yourself last winter when the roads were blocked and all you had was time and frostbite. You trim carefully, watching his face for signs of discomfort. He doesn't speak, just watches you with eyes that have seen too many winters. When you finish, he nods. You hand him a mirror, polished copper, warped, but enough. He smiles. It's crooked and mostly gum, but it's sincere. He leaves a silver coin. You want to refuse. It's too much. But he's already out the door. You tuck the coin into your apron pocket. You don't spend it. You never will. Some coins are not for spending. They're for remembering. By midday, your sleeves are stiff. Your apron, heavier. You wash your hands in a basin that hasn't seen clean water in a week. The blood doesn't fully come off, but that's fine. Your skin remembers what your eyes try to forget. There's a boy outside, watching. You know that look. Curious, too young to be afraid. You call him in. He says he wants to learn. You hand him the brush. Tell him to sweep. He does. You nod. That's how it starts. He asks about the pole outside. You explain it slowly, softly. In the old days, you say, barbers did more than shave. They healed, they stitched, they pulled, they cut. The pole, red and white, is the story of that work. The blood, the bandages, the service. It turns in the wind like a prayer for steadier hands. He asks about the leeches. You show him the jar. They wriggle, sluggish, bored. You tell him they feed on bad blood, that they know where the sickness lives. He stares at them with fascination and mild horror. You smile. It's a good start. The bell rings. Another visitor. This one is loud. A merchant, probably. Big hands, big voice. Says his head aches and his humors are out of balance. He wants a good bleeding. You nod, guide him to the chair, and tie his arm gently, but firmly. He flinches when the blade touches skin. You tell him to breathe. He doesn't, but the blood flows anyway. You fill half a bowl, no more, just enough to make him dizzy. Not dead. You bandage the cut and give him a bit of cloth, soaked in rosemary. He holds it to his nose, like it's sacred. He pays in coin and garlic. You accept both. Garlic is medicine too, when you believe in it hard enough. By late afternoon, the light through your window shifts. It turns golden, then bronze, then something softer, like the color of old parchment or memories you'd rather not unfold. The shadows stretch across the floor like tired arms, and you start to feel the weight of the day. Your hands ache. Your back whispers complaints in a language made of knots and stiffness. Your knees creak when you kneel to fetch more herbs from the shelf. Dried lavender, comfrey, and a scrap of moldy bread that's grown its own ideas about medicine. You crush the herbs gently with a mortar made from stone and habit. The scent rises like a soft reminder that healing isn't always about blades. There's one last patient. He arrives limping, leaning on a cane that's seen better centuries. He doesn't speak much, just lifts his pant leg and shows you an angry wound near the knee. You don't ask what caused it. A fight, a fall, a life. They all leave marks. You clean it gently, wiping away what looks like days of mud and sorrow. You hum softly, a tune you don't remember learning. Maybe your mother sang it. Maybe it came with the job. You apply a poultice, wrap the leg, and offer a boiled root to chew. He accepts with a nod, leaves with another. When he's gone, the shop is quiet. Finally, no voices, no groans, just the soft tick of a wood cooling against stone and the faint sound of leeches shifting in their jar. Even they seem tired now. You sit by the fire, you peel off your apron, you examine your hands. The nails are dark, the skin cracked, but underneath, they're still yours, still steady. You remember when you first started, how your father handed you the blade with a straight face and a bleeding thumb. "Practice," he said, "on me." You'd cut too deep. He didn't flinch. You learned fast. Being a barber wasn't just about cutting hair. It was about knowing how deep was too deep, when to stitch, when to burn, when to lie, and say it wasn't that bad. You learned the difference between a cough that goes away and a cough that never does. You learned how to comfort the dying without pretending they'll live. You learned how to clean a blade with fire and regret. And now, as the light fades and the cold creeps in around the edges of the stone walls, you rise for one last task. You clean your tools, each one handled like an old friend. The razor, still sharp. The saw, still mean. The clamps, the shears. The little hook, used for earwax and other unspeakable adventures. You rinse them, oil them, place them carefully in their spots. Because order is a kind of kindness. Your assistant is gone, probably asleep in the back, curled up on a sack of rags that smells like old soap and hay. You let him rest. He's young. He'll need it. You step outside. The sky is dark now. Not black, but that deep indigo that comes before full night. The stars begin to poke through, tentative and blinking. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. The street is quiet, the town asleep. You sit on the stone bench by your door. You exhale slowly. The air is cool. The smell of smoke and distant bread ovens mixes with the sharper scent of your own shop. Steel, vinegar, a touch of something you no longer notice. You think of all the things you've done today. Pulled a tooth, stitched a thigh, bleached a priest, calmed a merchant, shaved an elder, tended a wound, answered questions no one wanted to ask. You're not a doctor, not really, but you're close enough when night falls and no one else is open, and you've survived another day. Not everyone does. That's something. Inside, the fire dies low. You pour yourself a final drink. Weak wine, watered down. It tastes like relief. You sit in the same chair you've used for years. The cushion remembers your shape. You pull a blanket over your knees. Rough wool, mended at the edges, still warm from the sun that touched it earlier. You close your eyes. You hear the creak of the beams above you, the distant drip of rain in the alley, the faint sigh of your assistant dreaming in the back room. A leech wriggles in its jar. All of it. Soft, ordinary, eternal. And maybe you weren't meant for this life. Maybe you dreamed of something else once. But dreams fade, and sharp tools have a way of making you practical. Still, in this moment, as the night settles around your shop like a warm fog, you feel steady. You made it. One more day in a world that asks too much, too fast, with too little in return. But you gave what you had, your hands, your time, your quiet strength. And now, finally, you rest. The tools are silent, the fire is low, and the world outside your window drifts gently toward sleep, just like you. Let it. Let the night hold you, quiet and still. Let the shadows stretch long, and the stars settle in their sky. You're done now, and for tonight, that's enough. Zenobia was born around 240 CE in Palmyra, a prosperous city nestled in the Syrian desert, where silk caravans passed beneath swaying palm trees, and the stone gazes of ancient gods watched trade blossom. She was fluent in Greek, Latin, Aramaic, and even Egyptian. Some claimed she descended from Cleopatra herself, a legend that lent her an air of destiny even before she wore a crown. As the wife of Odenathus, who had secured the eastern Roman territories after defeating the Sassanids, Zenobia stood out for her intelligence and presence. She accompanied him on campaigns, gained the respect of Roman generals, and when he died, perhaps by conspiracy, in 267 or 268 CE, she quietly stepped forward, not as a widow in mourning, but as a mother, a scholar, and now a queen regent to her young son, Vabalathus. The Roman Empire, at the time, was fractured, caught in waves of civil wars, barbarian invasions, and humiliations, such as the capture of Emperor Valerian by the Persians. In this void, Zenobia's realm flourished. Her power became official just a few years later, and in 272, Zenobia declared herself Augusta, while her son took the title King of Kings, a move that signaled not just independence, but vision. Under her command, her generals marched south into Egypt, Alexandria, golden, ancient, and strategic, fell not with flames, but with resolve. For some, the conquest seemed foretold. Zenobia, the desert queen, daughter of Cleopatra's blood, reclaiming what had once belonged to her lineage, her armies advanced through Anatolia, claiming city after city. Palmyra became not only a military power, but a cultural haven, a cosmopolitan court that welcomed Jews, Christians, pagans, philosophers, and merchants alike. But Rome had found a new emperor, Aurelian, sharp, focused, and unrelenting. He could not tolerate a rival state, not in the East, not now, not with Rome so vulnerable. Their armies met in the dust near Antioch. At the Battle of Immae, Zenobia's heavy cavalry, clad in steel from head to hoof, glistened beneath the sun. But Aurelian was clever. He feigned retreat, lured her troops, and closed in like a tightening rope. Then came Emesa, another clash, another loss, and slowly the empire Zenobia had built began to slip away. Palmyra, her home, became her last stronghold. The city braced. Inside its ancient walls, Zenobia did not weep. She walked among the wounded. She spoke to her people with calm strength. She wrote a final letter, some say, sealed in blue ink and silence. And then she vanished, captured near the Euphrates, dressed in simple robes, riding a camel across the desert's edge. She was taken not with violence, but with awe. The Romans expected submission. Instead, they found serenity. She did not flinch before Aurelian. When asked why she dared challenge Rome, she is said to have answered, "I did what I had to do for my people," and then she said no more. In 274 CE, Zenobia appeared in a Roman triumph, adorned in golden chains, dressed as a queen. But the crowd, instead of mockery, fell into silence. There was something about her posture, her bearing. Even in defeat, she held dignity like a crown. Some say she was granted a villa and lived in quiet exile in the Italian countryside. Others believe she ended her life before Rome could define it. History does not agree, but legend remembers. If the stories are true, and perhaps they are, this is where Zenobia spent the rest of her days. The Roman villa stood far from the sands she once ruled, its walls draped in ivy, its fountains fed by gentle aqueducts that whispered of civilization and distance, not in chains, not in disgrace, but in the stillness of forced silence. The garden paths were quiet, the olive groves curved with age, and the marble benches still remembered the laughter of Roman nobility. But Zenobia, the former queen of Palmyra, walked those paths not as a guest, not as a prisoner, but as a memory that refused to fade. Here, far from Palmyra's golden stone, her days passed without ceremony. She rose before dawn, her mind still sharp, her hands still steady. They say she continued to read scrolls in Greek and Latin, letters sent from scholars, news carried by those who still dared speak her name. She never complained. There was no palace guard, no crown, no court filled with voices seeking approval. But Zenobia never needed a throne to rule. Her silence ruled. Her eyes spoke what others feared to say. Sometimes, in the mornings, she would walk to the edge of the vineyard and let the cool wind from the hills move through her linen sleeves. The wind was different here, softer, carrying the scent of cypress and crushed grape, not sand and date palms, but it moved the same way. It whispered stories, and Zenobia listened. Visitors came rarely, but they came. A retired general from the east once stood at her door. An old man, armor dusty, his eyes lined by the sun. He bowed low, without words, and left behind a dagger wrapped in blue cloth. She accepted it, not as a weapon, but as a memory, a symbol of what had been and of those who still remembered. She did not cry. Once, a Roman noblewoman came to speak with her. Young, curious, drawn by the echo of a name she had only read in scrolls. She asked Zenobia why she had risen against the empire. The answer was slow, but firm. Because no one else did, Zenobia said. The young woman asked if she regretted it. Zenobia looked toward the setting sun, golden through the villa's arches. Would you regret breathing? She asked softly, and nothing more was said. In time, her children grew. One, perhaps, raised in Roman tradition. Another, remembering his mother's tongue. She taught them both, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She showed them maps, told them stories of cities that burned too brightly, of soldiers who fought for ideas bigger than crowns, of a city made of stone and wind and memory. She never asked them to follow her path, only to remember it. And Palmyra, what became of it? After her capture, the city resisted once more. The second revolt was brief. Rome crushed it swiftly, with fire and fury. The temples were broken, statues pulled down. The once beautiful colonnade now led to silence, but ruins do not forget. The stones still bore her initials. The wells still tasted of her reign, and travelers would speak, even in whispers, of the queen who once defied the eagle. Back in the villa, Zenobia aged gracefully. Her hair, once black and woven with gold, turned silver and soft, but her eyes remained sharp, like obsidian wrapped in silk. On quiet evenings, she would sit by the water basin, watching the moon ripple on its surface, as if waiting for it to carry her reflection back to the desert. The Roman servants grew to respect her, not for her past, which they barely understood, but for her presence, for her calm, for the way she never raised her voice, yet always seemed to be heard. They called her Domina, not because they were told to, but because they felt they must. One winter, as snow dusted the terracotta tiles of the villa, she fell ill. The doctors came. The scrolls of medicine were read. But Zenobia, ever serene, simply smiled. "I have outlived empires," she whispered. And when the time came, she asked to be wrapped not in silk, but in the simple linen robes of her youth. No gold, no crown, only a small medallion in her hand, the symbol of Palmyra, carved long ago, worn smooth by decades of thought. She closed her eyes. The air was still. Outside, the cypress trees bent gently in the wind. Some say she was buried beneath the villa. Others believe her remains were taken secretly back to Syria, laid to rest beneath the very sands where she once stood tall. But no one knows for sure. What remains is the story. A queen who defied Rome, a scholar who ruled with thought as much as with sword, a woman of the desert, remembered not for how she fell, but for how she stood. The years passed, as they always do, with the gentle certainty of waves smoothing stone. In Rome, emperors came and went. Statues were raised, and just as quickly forgotten. Palaces crumbled into dust. But somewhere, beyond the reach of time's sharpest winds, Zenobia endured. Not in body, perhaps, but in something quieter. In the hush between stories, in the shadow of an old arch, in the mind of a traveler gazing east, toward the sand. There were those who claimed to have seen her, even long after her death, an old woman wrapped in linen near the temples of Baal, a veiled figure walking alone in the early dawn of the Palmyrene ruins, a voice in dreams, speaking softly in languages no longer spoken. But those are stories, gentle fictions that help us sleep, and maybe that's enough. What history does preserve is something more delicate, a series of records, etched in stone or copied on parchment, telling of a reign both brief and bold. They speak of a court filled with scholars, where art and astronomy met beneath mosaics of lions and palm trees, of a queen who rode beside her army, who debated philosophers, who protected temples and trade routes with the same devotion. They tell of laws written in 4 tongues, of merchants who journeyed thousands of miles to kneel in her court, of poets who dared call her divine. For a few shining years, the desert bloomed, not with rain, but with culture. And still, the city she called home waits. Palmyra, crumbled, cracked, but never erased. Its columns reach skyward like fingers longing to touch memory. Its silence hums with stories that will not die. You walk there now, in your mind. You follow the curve of the ancient colonnade, each step pressing softly into centuries of dust. The wind rises and falls, lifting grains of sand like golden threads unraveling in the sun. In the distance, the Temple of Bel still stands, half swallowed by time, and near it, perhaps, a garden, small, overgrown, hidden by thorned shrubs and fig trees. In that garden, you see a stone bench, worn, but still warm from the day's fading light, and on it, the outline of a woman once called queen. She does not turn. She does not need to. You know her. The blue of her robe blends with the shadows. The scent of myrrh clings faintly to the folds of her sleeve. Her hands are resting in her lap, no longer grasping scrolls or reins, but simply folded in peace. You sit beside her, say nothing, because there's nothing left to say. All has been done. Her empire, brief though it was, echoes still, not in conquests or coins, but in the quiet admiration of those who remember, in every story told around a low fire, in every child who learns that queens wore armor too. Zenobia lived with dignity, and she was captured with dignity. She lost her crown, but never her voice, and that is what remains. Not the battles, not the palaces, but the woman who dared to exist fully in a world that expected her to shrink. And now, as the stars bloom overhead, slow and steady as jasmine on a summer night, you feel that same dignity settle around you. You are safe. The fire has gone low. The columns around you lean gently with age. The garden has gone quiet. And still, Zenobia remains. Not in body, but in silence, in memory, in the hush that follows courage. So now, as sleep gathers in the corners of your mind, as your breath slows and deepens, let yourself drift. Let the desert hold you. Let the stars shield you. Let the winds of the ancient East sing you to rest. For you are not alone, and neither is she. You stand in the shifting glow around the base of Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara, the world's first monumental stone structure, rising above you in 6 carefully stacked tiers. It is the year 2650 BC, and the desert air tastes of limestone dust and whispered ambition. A man emerges through the soft haze, Imhotep, architect, priest, healer, plebeian-born genius. He holds in his mind the secret you can almost sense, the hidden link between stone and sky, death and eternity. Imhotep hums beneath his breath, the vibrations matching the rumble of laborers chiseling away at massive blocks behind him. He is still young, but his resolve is ancient. Born to a modest craftsman, he learned to read hieroglyphs and study the journey of the sun across the heavens. He moved through temples and scribal schools with a quiet confidence, an outsider with eyelids heavy from scrolls, not the sun. On this morning, he's dressed in a simple linen robe, but carries the aura of a man already touching immortality. He passes through scaffolding and wooden ramps, placing each limestone block with uncanny precision. No blueprint, only vision. No blueprint, because he is the blueprint. But there is resistance. High priests of Ra at Heliopolis murmur behind closed doors. A mortal layman carving stone blocks into an eternal tomb. A pretender to divine privilege, Imhotep feels their eyes as chills along his spine. He holds his calm close, channeling the slow pulse of that desert dawn. During midday, he retreats to the courtyard beside a carved Sphinx statue set into the compound's corridor. He kneels before a smooth face of black granite and places his hand, left palm aligned with its lion's muzzle. He breathes out, the dust twirling in devotional ripples. "Show me," he whispers. "Let me know the secret." He doesn't expect an answer in words. Instead, the Sphinx's gaze holds his, and something in the shifting light in the stone's porous heart seems to shimmer. Not a voice, but a pressure in his mind. Flight above the sun, a pulse beyond death. There, the myth begins. That evening, Imhotep kneads clay under crimson torches, crafting an amulet shaped like a miniature sphinx. 2 inlaid dots of obsidian form its eyes. He pours into it prayers to Ptah, the creator god, and Thoth, the keeper of wisdom. It takes 7 nights for the amulet to cure, 7 nights for Imhotep's mind to spiral half a whisper beyond mortality. Whispers come, carried over dusty corridors. Priests question his motive. The pharaoh asks for progress on the mortuary complex. He refuses to build merely a tomb. He builds a vessel for ascension. That pyramid is not stone. It is intention piled full of every late-night epiphany. Then comes news from Heliopolis, a plague among children. Fevers, rattles, coughs. He cannot avert it with rituals alone. Under torchlight, he combines known poultices, lichen, frankincense, willow bark, and soothes the afflicted. It is crude healing, but it works. His reputation as a sage physician spreads further than his pyramid. Priests soften their glances. They come to him, quietly, offering secrets of embalming, forecasting floods, noting the celestial circumpolar. He listens. He learns. He shares nothing beyond that stone's silent promise. Back at the Sphinx statue, during midday's quiet heat, he repeats his tactile conversation. This time, heat rises, and he sees in the shimmer a cat's leap, a horizon's crown, a promise of undying life. He stands, unsettled. His destiny quickens. The pyramid climbs higher, teeth of stone biting into the sky. Imhotep designs columns, the first stone columns in Egypt, shaped like bundled reeds, cataloging water and light in rigid rhythm. He invents new tools. He measures shadows precisely at noon to orient perfect cardinal alignment. He maps the sun's journey across walls so that, once buried, Djoser's spirit will rise with it. At night, he inscribes formulae on papyrus, ratios of pyramid faces, mixtures for medicines, invocations for the dead. A mystery lingers in his architecture. Hidden chambers, tunnels that lead nowhere, passages filled with glyphs that seem to swirl under touch. On the 7th year of the pyramid's rise, Pharaoh Djoser dies. The court mourns. The pyramid stands unfinished. Imhotep guides the rituals, sealing stone after stone, until the structure stands complete, crowned by ethereal white limestone, shining like wet river rock. He whispers, "May he ascend." But rumors swirl. Imhotep grasps forbidden power. Priests demand he break the amulet. He refuses. They demand he unbuild his pyramid. He refuses. At dawn, they come, long knives glinting, clamoring for the protection of order. He vanishes. They search labyrinthine alleys of Saqqara. They find him standing at the head of the Sphinx statue, amulet pulsing against his chest. They seize him. He does not yell. He does not flee. They strip the amulet. It cracks, not crumble, but crack. The obsidian eyes fracture. Silence spreads. They hold a reckoning. The priests demand exile. Pharaoh's grandson spares his life, fearing the builder's loyalty. Imhotep is sent to Heliopolis, to the library, to continue as physician and scribe. His pyramid legacy stands, and the amulet's power sleeps in broken grains. In exile, his days are soft. Word of Imhotep's genius traveled like smoke through desert winds. Even from Heliopolis, whispers crossed dunes and courtyards. The man who split limestone with his mind. Students sought him. Patients arrived, seeking cures for bleeding, fever, broken bones. He wrote treatises on anatomy and salves, many dedicated to Thoth, god of wisdom. His book of inventions circulates mostly in whispers. He meditated as he wrote, fingers tracing hieroglyphs shaped like reeds, wings, eyes, ancient symbols of life's dance. Though exiled, he remained connected. Evening after evening, he sent travelers back toward Saqqara, sliding clay tablets into hidden niches, notes on engineering, on healing, on design elements lost to jealous scribes, a reed column blueprint, a mortar made stronger by brick and ash, a cure for infected wounds, all carried on camelbacks, concealed beneath grain and scent of date palm. Meanwhile, the step pyramid stood silent witness. Moonlight draped its tears in ghostly tears of silver, and at the limestone apex, a single star hovered like a firefly stuck in air. No longer the product of a single designer, it now shaped the future of architecture. Columns and pyramidal flares echoed in temples and tombs for centuries. Imhotep, in exile, did not seek glory. He sat in candle-lit hallways at Heliopolis's sacred sanctum, balancing scales on sand, measuring powders. He saw patients and scribes, but avoided court life when he could. The priests still watched him, an adrenal spark in their eyes. Even far from Saqqara, they feared what he represented, the unpredictable interplay between mortal thought and divine dust. One night, as Sothis, Sirius, rose with Venus, he felt the urge to walk beneath Heliopolis's aged cedar and sycamore groves. He walked slowly, cane-tapping cracked earth, lantern light breathing in shadows. He carried with him the broken piece of his amulet, the obsidian eye. It felt warm when held, pulsing lightly against his palm. He stopped before a cenotaph, a statue to the gods of healing. Beneath it, he placed the obsidian shard in a crevice of stone and whispered a prayer for patience, for peace, for understanding. The wind whispered back, branches swaying, a distant owl crying. In that quiet, he remembered how it felt to stand inside the mortuary courtyard at Saqqara, dust underfoot, laborers pausing to glance upward at his design. He recalled the first night when, after moonset, he saw the curving arches of limestone almost breathe. He walked through them then and felt the pyramid exhale its secret. Tonight, he exhaled too. Seasons passed like silent pagodas, floods, the rise of kings, priests moving stones, dismantling shrines. Imhotep aged slowly, wisdom layering upon bone and blood. His name was no longer whispered as the exile, but as the master physician. He wore no crown, yet priests came to him for counsel. Students knelt, scribes copied his illustrations, doctors sprinkled his powders into medicine jars. And even then, he kept just a fragment of magic, healing, itself an art, a communion between life and death. One illness he once thought incurable, he managed to cure. The high priest of Ra fell ill, his lungs filled with phlegm, his cough rattling like dry timber. Imhotep treated him with willow bark tea, calamus root, and hem-pulled poultices, while he chanted hymns to Ptah for calm. Day by day, the priest's cough quieted. Soon, he walked the temple halls again. He knelt before the exile and spoke with sincerity, something like awe in his voice. "You walk with the knowledge of gods," he said. "We feared your power, but perhaps we feared it too soon." By then, Imhotep no longer needed the top tier of the pyramid in his memory. Its blueprint lived in every column built at Edfu, in every obelisk chiseling sky at Karnak, in the alignment of the rising sun upon royal tombs. He had become architecture itself, a way of thinking in stone. And still, the Sphinx's secret hummed beneath the desert. Late one evening, a young architect and devoted scribe named Mer Amun arrived from Thebes. He carried gifts, papyrus bundles, fine ink, a small alabaster jar of cedar oil. He bowed, and spoke in trembling breaths, "My lord, I came seeking your wisdom and your story." Imhotep took the ink and spilled a single drop on his finger. He traced on a small tile in Meramun's hands a rough line: the tip of the pyramid, pyramid's shadow, Sphinx's paw, and an arrow beneath. Then he wrote 3 glyphs: life, stone, eternity. The young man wiped his brow. "Is this?" Imhotep nodded. "Not immortality," he said softly, "but presence." Together, they spent nights by the temple fountain, studying Sphinx glyphs, reading papyrus accounts, listening to winds that carried stories of scavenger birds and shifting dunes. The secret they uncovered was never a magic elixir, but a principle: that to shape stone with intention, to heal with wisdom, to speak with truth, these were acts of eternity. Softly, Imhotep taught Mer-Amun how to carve stone collars to channel water, how to build narrow shafts in tombs to align with celestial bodies, how to pour honey into wounds to stave infection. The disciple listened. He learned. The master softened, no longer wary, but welcoming. In his final years, Imhotep walked once more beneath limestone arches at Saqqara. He placed a calm hand over the pyramid's base and smiled. He touched the final block and said to the wind, "We built this for eternity, not for glory." His voice hushed. A caravan bell on the horizon, the desert shift of wind, and there, beneath his hand, the star aligned above the apex responded with a winking glimmer. When he passed, some say in his sleep, some say beside the temple waters, his body was trusted to the earth. Students and priests carried him gently, cloaked in linen, and buried him in a secret tomb near the library of Heliopolis. That location faded with dust. No one could ever find his resting place, but the secret remained, not in a jar, not in a spell, but in every stone built by intention and every life touched by wisdom. Generations pass. The library's flames flicker and die, but his name grows. In the new kingdom, scribes begin calling him a demigod. His wisdom, medicine, knowledge, architecture, becomes mythological. Greeks equate him with Asclepius. Temples built in his name serve pilgrims. Even the Sphinx seems to smile a knowing, silent grin, its secret intact. You stand again by that statue, thousands of years later in your mind. The desert wind flows across worn nose, across broken ear. You run a finger across the chipped stone, smooth there, where the shattering happened. You breathe out. Imhotep's name means he who comes in peace. You understand now it might also mean he who sought beyond death and glimpsed eternity in stone. And still, his secret remains hidden, not in dust or ruin, but in every structure that aspires to touch heaven with earth, in every healing drop of medicine, in every whisper of human curiosity. So you walk away, leaving the Sphinx behind, your footsteps soft on ancient sand. And as you drift toward sleep, feel the hum of stone around you, the hush in papyrus, scrolls, the quiet pulse of ambition that once touched immortality. The secret remains. Imhotep remains. Let the stone cradle you now. Let the mystery carry you farther than the pyramid ever could. The morning mist hovers over the temple of Apollo at Delphi, shimmering around stone columns etched with ancient wisdom. You step into the adytum, the sacred inner chamber where only the chosen may tread. At its heart stands a small crevice in the rock, whispering with ethereal fumes rising from beneath. This is where she sits, the Pythia, cradle and conduit for divine utterances. She is young, her robes simple, her posture reverent. A branch of bay laurel rests in her lap, anointed with water from the Castalian spring. Priests, too protocoled by cloaks, watch her closely, their eyes flicking between her pale face and each inhalation of chthonic breath. In her mind stirs a mosaic of whispered voices, half dream, half vision. Apollo's presence is real, his voice a memory of wind. Yet each question posed to her by kings, generals, supplicants, passes first through these priests. Their lips form the words of destiny, translating her breathless phrases into rhythmic hexameter, polished for respect and profit. Among the supplicants is a traveling noblewoman seeking wisdom for her embattled city-state. She kneels before Pythia with offerings rich as royal tribute. Gold coins spill onto marble. One priest smiles subtly. This brings promentia, priority for those who bring gifts. The noble's tongue is smooth, her bribe precise. Soon, her petition is voiced by the priests. The Pythia rocks gently, trance deepening. She utters fragments, words rising like smoke, cross the eagle's path. The priests nod. A prophecy is born. The noblewoman rises, certain she will triumph. But for the Pythia, a fragment of unease stays, a dissonance between voice and will. She senses what wasn't asked, layered behind the orders of priests. She was a vessel, but now her vessel is leaking truth. Afterward, in quieter halls, she seeks to understand. She recalls the stories of Pythian priestesses, how they once served Gaia, Three, and Emma, the primal oracles, before Apollo claimed Delphi. In those days, prophecy came unfiltered. She craves that purity. So she begins to watch. She sees priests slipping into hidden niches, whispering directions and tilting votive altars. She overhears merchants and nobles scheming for inside advantage. We gave gold. We get better counsel. She realizes the oracle's truth is now brokered, true prophecy bartered behind veils. One night, after a fast and ritual bath by the Castalian spring, she stands in the chamber alone. The priests are gone. No visitors whisper. The stone is cold. Moonlight filters through the cracks. She inhales the fumes slowly. In the silence, stronger voice emerges, not from Apollo, but from within herself. A question rises. Whose voice am I? She feels the floor beneath her tremble, not with earthquakes, but a tremor born of awakening. She stands, breath caught. On the following day, prophecy day, she seats herself as expected. A delegation of nobles cross the courtyard, bringing fine oil, song, and deference. She stares at them unblinking. The priests begin their usual staging, and then she speaks, not in fragmented hexameter, but clearly, slowly. You receive not Apollo's will, but our own reflection. Gasps echo. The priests falter. The nobles' smiles vanish. This is her rebellion. Word spreads. Some pilgrims cheer, others tut, clutching their gifts. The priests hiss among themselves, but she continues. Return truth to the voice of Delphi. Let Apollo speak, not human greed. As dusk falls, Delphi convulses. Temples are lit by torches, as priests hold clandestine council. The Pythia is threatened with removal, but townsfolk protect her. They remember the ancient oracles. Know thyself. That night, she escapes, not into a tomb, but into the labyrinth of corridors beneath Delphi. Fissures open. Fumes enfold her. In the mist, she hears Python's hiss, Apollo's melody. She lifts her hands and whispers, "Truth, return now." Outside at dawn, the priests attempt a new ceremony. The fumes rise, but this time, the Pythia sits alone on the tripod. No gifts adorn, no bribes guide, only her voice and the tremble of divine breath. A crowd gathers. She speaks, clear, unbound. The priests interpret less. Her voice carries. Kings will still seek guidance, but now perhaps they will hear more than what fills purses. The morning mist lifts from the ancient stones of Delphi as the Pythia walks softly through colonnades carved with centuries of devotion. In her robes of white wool, she carries a small ritual bowl filled with fresh water from the Castalian spring, its surface shimmering with dawn light. Each step she takes is measured, deliberate, an echo of every priestess before her. Though she has reclaimed her voice, many in the temple resist. The high priest continues to counsel patrons on how to phrase their offerings and questions so that the Pythia would give favorable answers. He believes custom must be preserved. The flow of offerings and political prestige depend on it. But more people arrive daily, guided by whispers of her true visions. Merchants, soldiers, ambassadors, all seeking something more than scripted prophecy. One day, a deputation from Sparta enters the temple. They carry a golden wreath and a query. Should they preserve their isolationist laws or open their borders to alliances? Before, priests would shape the phrasing to welcome tribute. Now, the Pythia speaks plainly. Strength lies in clarity and unity, not in walls. A shield alone cannot protect a divided heart. Her words travel faster than the wind. In Sparta's streets, elders pause, exchange uneasy glances. Alliances are forged. A new league forms, one built not on agreements alone, but on empathy. Delphi's voice becomes a catalyst. Meanwhile, the political elite of Athens convene, anxious. They consult her for guidance against Thebes. She receives them at dusk, as shadows stretch across the temple floor. The question, what justice demands? She breathes the sacred fumes, closes her eyes, and answers, justice is measured not in victories, but in how you treat those you defeat. There, in her calmly delivered wisdom, Athens decides not to punish Thebans, but to offer rebuilding aid in return for peace. The city-state's influence grows, not by conquest, but by example. As her influence expands, so too does tension in Delphi. The old priests murmur that she has upset the ordering of the divine. They plot, whispering of ancient omens and demanding her removal. Yet when the full moon rises and floods part of the Adyton chamber, the temple itself seems to speak. The fissures crack, but no water enters. Only sacred sand trickles into her robes. Interpreters say the gods themselves affirm her. One priest, believing she has become a demigoddess, challenges her publicly. He demands she prove Apollo's favor by naming the high priest's secret lineage hidden in Delphian records. The gathered pilgrims fall into anticipatory silence. Breathing slowly, she closes her eyes above the sacred spring. For a long moment, the amphitheater is dark and expectant. Then she speaks, soft but unwavering. His blood flows from earth and sky, born of Delphi, as all mortals are born of the gods. The priests recoil. They thought the test would crush her. Instead, it breaks them. Unity takes hold. Delphi is reformed in her vision, no longer a shadowed hall of hidden agendas, but a sanctuary of truth. Priests, now humbled, serve as her guardians, pledged to uphold her words rather than disguise them. Years pass, and the Pythia ages, but she ages with grace, her hair silvering like moonlight on temple marble. Pilgrims still come, but not to manipulate or deceive. They come to listen, to learn, to be reminded that mortal and divine aren't opposites, but intertwined. On her final day, she seats herself on the tripod. One last time, she counts no offerings. No noble delegation stands before her. The temple is quiet, filled only with lapping water and drifting incense. She breathes deeply. In that moment, she speaks not for another, but for all. Let your lives reflect what you seek. If you yearn for harmony, be harmony. If you crave justice, live justly. Let your hearts echo the divine. As the words settle, a hush crosses Delphi, more powerful than any decree. The temple acknowledges her final truth. Prophecy is not magic, it is moral compass. The earth listens. The stones absorb the lesson. The mountains hold vigil. You stand beside her, and you feel it. The weight of centuries, the power of truth unfiltered, the possibility of goodness guided by courage. And as you drift toward rest, let your breath echo hers. Let your conscience rise quietly, like dawn mist lifting from Parnassus. Let Delphi's secret settle in your heart. Let the oracle's courage cradle your dreams. Let the night carry you home.